Hello and welcome to Connected Voices. I'm your host, Jared VanAllen. We're pleased to have a new episode of Connected Voices beginning today. Joining me in this episode, I have Jennifer Huber. I've known Jennifer for a few years, and Jennifer is a staple in the wireless industry. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be able to be here and have this conversation with you.
Thank you so
been a
much.
hot minute.
It's been a little while since we've sat down as Ventive with you. So, number one, thank you again. It's always a pleasure to work with you. Jennifer, you've been in the wireless industry for a couple of days now, and I know you've seen a lot of things come and go, a lot of generations of wireless. We're now staring down the barrel of Wi-Fi 7, which is kind of the general context of this discussion.
Yep.
We're expecting ratification from IEEE for Wi-Fi 7 and hopefully before the end of the year. Is that what you're hearing as well?
That's what I'm hearing, but I'm not going to hold my breath because these things they'll put a date on the calendar and then just walk right past it without acknowledging that it's been passed. So it's going to happen whenever it's going to happen. We're going to see lots of, marketing fluff and people swearing that their stuff is ready, that it's certified or whatever, and they're just not using the verbiage correctly. But that's classic for consumer, prosumer, or even like early enterprise stuff. So your mileage may vary with new bleeding edge hardware. Just saying.
And we've seen that with some of the major manufacturers
of course
as well, not just the small ones.
Yeah.
So,
of course.
Understood. The Wi-Fi 7 standards, though, kind of portray a pretty big leap in the technology associated and the real actual usable speeds of wireless, right? So we'll talk about that in a minute.
It sure does. This is like the biggest advancement that we've seen probably since, I don't know, late 2000 and probably 2006-ish, maybe. It's been a long time since we've had a leap of this magnitude for sure.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's very important to understand that the last time we saw this kind of an influence on the Wi-Fi industry, it also drove a massive change in everything behind that on the local area network and even the WAN side, right? So I'm sure we'll touch more about that.
Yeah. I would liken this to when Cisco in particular was trying to be first to market with I think it was the 1250 model access point, that they made that big modular thing because they weren't sure if N was going to be hardware or software. So they wanted to make sure that their hardware was modular. So if they needed to upgrade to the hardware, they could do that. I think this is going to be something similar to that, where we're sort of certain about what it's going to mean, but we're not entirely sure how it's going to be carried out. So I think some vendors are still sitting on the fence, waiting to make sure that that they're actually ready for Wi-Fi 7. So
I think that's what we're seeing as well. Actually ready for Wi-Fi 7. Let's go back to that in just a minute. So we went through Wi-Fi 6. We went through Wi-Fi 6E that was slowed down by the FCC getting their act together, I would say, for automated frequency coordination.
Yes, that took a bit. Yeah. But that's done now. Yeah.
Well, it didn't happen until like March, right?
Yeah. It was right after WLPC. I think it was like 2 days after WLPC was done. The Wireless LAN Professionals Conference.
Yes. Thank you very much for clarifying that.
Sure.
Because I understand it, but hopefully
not everybody does. Acronyms. There's so many acronyms in the Wi-Fi space. It's kind of absurd sometimes.
It is. Never get bored with acronyms in this industry.
No.
But back to that subject, Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 6E, and now Wi-Fi 7 coming up at us very quickly here. That's actually the fastest transition between generations of wireless in the history of wireless by a long shot.
Agreed.
Right? Agreed. Now, the last time this happened with wireless N, as you mentioned, I was here too. I'm a young guy, as you can tell, so I was here. And when I watched that happen, what I saw was wireless N access points forcing people to upgrade their PoE forcing them to upgrade the speed of their access or branch
Yep.
switches,
Yep.
their aggregation, their core, and really it impacted the entire stack all the way down to the servers, the storage, and the network interface cards in them. Right?
Absolutely. And we're seeing the same thing this time around too, because the more recent access points require more power over Ethernet, whether they're 6 or 6E. Each iteration requires more electricity to power those different features and advanced features on the access points to make sure all of the radios are enabled, so that you can get the massive throughput increases. It's going to touch every part of the networking infrastructure, just like I would say it kind of always has, because the AP pulls everything forward. Because if you want all of those speeds and feeds, if you want all of the radios to work at the same time, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of all that, but you need more electricity. You need better copper cabling. You need maybe more copper cabling for each access point. Sometimes APs need two connections. I think that we're getting to the point now where a single physical connection to an AP is no longer going to be a bandwidth restriction point, as technology has improved on how to manage that and fluctuate the throughput to an AP over a single copper drop. But you may see you need to upgrade your cable trays. You need to do more drills. You maybe need to remove some of that old copper cabling in the ceiling to make room for new stuff. So the AP pulls it forward always.
Very interesting you point that out because I think that people often forget that. We talk about the wireless office today. Everyone wants, especially at the C level, in
Yeah.
the executive offices, they want to talk about the wireless office. I want to carry my PC or my tablet with me everywhere, and that's all I want, right? I
Yep.
don't want to be connected to this.
Yeah. I mean, you can absolutely do that, but your
But
client still makes the decision on which AP it joins. Your client still makes the decision on when it roams, and all clients are different. Each chip manufacturer, each wireless card manufacturer has a different algorithm for when it roams or when it doesn't roam. So you may have an all wireless office, but still you're with the unlicensed spectrum, you're still at beholden to what the client wants to do.
right,
It's just the way that it works. It's not like the cellular, where the infrastructure tells the client what to do and the client does what it's told. It's
right.
the exact opposite.
So that becomes critical in the applications as we move forward, which we'll talk about. Now, as I look at that, Jennifer, the thing that that brings to play is that I want to stop having to have that RJ45 jack on every desktop, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I don't have to pay attention to my wiring infrastructure. In fact, I have to do either multiple multi-gig drops or multiple 10 gig drops
Yeah.
to each access point
Can
to
be,
get
depending
rid of
upon the
that.
model.
Yep. And I have to oversaturate it basically
Yeah. Yeah.
to take the place.
Yeah, and certainly you need to make sure that if you're doing any kind of voice or video over wireless, that you've enabled QoS on the wired and the wireless side so that you can prioritize your traffic so that you don't get, buffering or jitter or dropped frames or frozen frames. Because, it's the return to work and all of the collaboration tools that we got used to using the voice and video collaboration tools, regardless of which vendor they're by. Bringing that stuff back into the office is shining the very bright spotlight on networks that were good enough before, but are now just crumbling because of the way that we've changed how we do work, regardless of where we're sitting when we do the work.
Now, back in the day, the complaint used to be, well, why would I want to upgrade to wireless N? There's no devices.
Mhm.
You just touched on the fact there's already a bunch of devices that are Wi-Fi 7. Uh,
And there's going to be more. We're getting into the holiday season where new consumer devices are put out on the market. We're going to see new laptops and tablets and whatnot that are available that are going to be capable of doing Wi-Fi 7. And people are going to upgrade their home networks and they're going to expect their devices, like classically, like they always have, to work like they do at home in the office, which may take a little bit more work.
right, right. In the office. So basically at this point, when I go to that wireless office, the first industries that are impacted by really using Wi-Fi 7, what do you think those are going to be? I have my opinions, but what do you think
Well,
those are going to be?
traditionally, they've always been healthcare number one. Healthcare because there's so many huge image files that are moved around, whether they be patient records or imaging records, X-rays, MRIs, CT scans. All of those files are massive in their file size. And often the patients are portable, the doctors are portable, sometimes the equipment is portable. So it's not unusual in any way, shape, or form for those files to be transferred or accessed via a wireless connection. It's not unusual at all.
To do that in a Wi-Fi 7 environment, and I know I'm talking a couple of years out here by the time things get fixed. I have to upgrade to Cat 7 cabling. I have to
Yep.
connect. I have to upgrade all my access layer switches. I have to upgrade all my
Yep.
aggregation switches. I have to upgrade my core. I have to do those things. But when that happens, and I'm a physician and I'm sitting within a campus hospital, situation. And I'm looking with my radiologist who's on the other end of the campus at an MRI, and I'm looking at that lung MRI. It's probably two or three or four people looking at that, or five at once, right? At
It's
different
entirely
areas.
possible. Yeah, it's entirely possible to have multiple people accessing the same data at the same time. And honestly, when we get there, when we get where everything's Wi-Fi 7, the clients and the access points and all of that, and everything's been upgraded, honestly, the end user should not be able to tell that there's any difference. They should just be able to do their job the way that they've always done their job, and they'd be completely unaware that the data that they're accessing has increased in its file size massively since, when wireless was first put into hospital environments.
And they should, in fact, if anything, just see an improvement in the speed that it takes to
Yeah,
provide that
yeah, yeah.
information, the seamlessness. Now, the last piece of that, though, is that today there's not often that what we'll call a third party in on that big local party, and that's artificial intelligence.
Yeah. We're going to
Because if
start
I'm
seeing that. Yeah, certainly it's definitely crept into all of the different verticals that I've interacted with. It's starting to become more intertwined with video. It first started out just as text, and now we're getting speech synthesis, video creation. There may be video analysis that's done by an AI infrastructure.
and even in the case of the medical field, an active AI interface.
Yeah,
So a literally active participant in that discussion, right?
yeah, yeah,
Now that takes a lot of bandwidth
it does. It does.
all across the stack,
It does.
right? Now, interestingly enough, I'm pretty opinionated because I do wireless. Um, I think wireless is I would call it, well, I guess it's maybe a little bit old school sales parlance, but kind of the literal tip of the spear into the next generation of how we deal with information in a wireless environment.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. The way I've always seen it happen is that the wireless leads the rest of the infrastructure into upgrades. For the longest time, wireless had 802.1x security as like table stakes, and we just didn't see that on the wired side because at the time, like basically a lifetime ago, we would see that all of that had to be done manually, where you had to put 802.1x on a switch port, one switch port at a time. There wasn't the automation and configuration with a couple of mouse clicks that we have capable now. So wireless definitely led the security front. It definitely like brings all of the Christmas toys back into the office, which forces everybody to upgrade. It's just the way that things are. Wireless leads everything forward.
Yeah, and I think you said it when we first were prepping for this conversation. Like a bull with a ring in its nose,
Yeah,
right? It's a
yeah.
great big network following behind it,
Pulls the whole
and
thing forward.
yeah, all right. I'm excited about Wi-Fi 7. I've been doing this for a number of decades, and there are some who would say I probably should retire. And it keeps me too mentally active to even think about that, honestly. Um, but this is, in my opinion, from the standpoint of people providing the hardware, the software, the services, the support, the expertise. Probably one of the most exciting times we've seen in a really long time. And I'm looking at this thinking, I get to look at being able to kind of wind my career down around one of the largest single revolutions in networking
Yeah.
in 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, who can say where we're going to go next from here? But this is definitely like the biggest uplift, upheaval, transition that I've seen since probably 2004, 2005,
When you were 14.
2006.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I got it. I got it. One of the last things we need to talk about is that this also requires a change in how you look at security.
Yep.
What do you think?
Again, wireless pulls everything forward. I had a similar situation early in the day where we had two SSIDs with a static web key on the same key index number, and that just didn't fly with the latest version of code. So it's the same thing with WPA4. We're going to have to really take a hard look at how we do user authentication. You may have to change how you do that. Definitely set up a different SSID, do a lot of testing, make sure your client devices roam seamlessly. It's going to require some infrastructure touching to get WPA4 enabled. I mean, and it's just the nature of the beast. It's a constant evolution of how we associate, how we authenticate, how we roam. It's
And if we
Wi-Fi.
want to get to that next level,
Yeah.
it's just a simple fact that we have to change.
Yeah.
Now, I'll say one of my personal philosophies about change is that it doesn't really exist. Change is not a thing.
It's
A result. Keep up.
Yeah, it's
Just
constant.
keep up.
Yeah.
And change happens, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the same thing here with what we're talking about. Now, Jennifer, from the Ventive infrastructure standpoint, we're kind of ready for what Wi-Fi 6E and Wi-Fi 7 bring to play. Of course, there's a couple little caveats with some of the manufacturers that they have to bring themselves up to speed with that. But we have a full line, of course, of those like the antennas, all of those mounts, the cables, the connectors, the enclosures and things to be able to house those access points. But we really need in that people like you to be able to come in and provide the consultation, provide the avenue to how I actually go put this in. It's pretty simple for me to say, I'm ready with all my antennas, but I got to have people like you.
Yes, absolutely. It's one thing to talk about it, but you have to know what the power requirements are. Do your enclosures have enough outlets for all of the external antennas? Does the solar array provide enough power so that the battery, can have charge overnight if everything's fully enabled on the access point? You have to really get down into the weeds and look at connectors. What kind of connector do you have on the access point? Do you need an adapter to get to the pigtail, to get to the external antenna? All of that stuff is where literally the rubber meets the road, and you can really go sideways if you have not thought, or I tend to draw things out. So I make sure that I have all the connectors that I need, because I have a project a million years ago where I didn't do that, or I thought I'd done it, and we ended up having to buy a whole bunch of different adapters, which introduces a new point of failure into your system, and you don't want that. So don't do that. Make sure that you've looked at every piece from soup to nuts, and that you have everything that you need. And I know Ventev has all of the parts and pieces that you could possibly need. And if they don't have it off the shelf, you can certainly be like, I need a pigtail that's 15 inches because I need a drip loop or whatever. And the only one that's sold in the kit is blah, blah, blah. So customization may be your best friend, maybe. It depends.
Well, thanks, Jennifer. We try hard, and we rely on people like you and your organization. And I'll say, you're currently with Worldwide Technologies, and so you're with a powerhouse organization that honestly does a lot with some pretty major organizations along these lines. So your input is very valued.
Thank you.
Jennifer, is there anything else you want to add as we look at closing out our chat here?
No, there isn't anything that I want to add. It's been nice talking with you, and I'm certain that there's always more to come on the horizon. What's after Wi-Fi 7? Who knows? There's something for sure. It's not done. I don't think that Wi-Fi will ever stop evolving.
No, I agree. There's a lot of other bandwidths and there's a lot of other
Yep.
technologies getting ready to meld over the next
Yep.
few years too,
Yep.
right? So we'll stay up to date on that. Thank you very much for your expertise and as always for your, easy ability to work with you. It's always
Thank you.
appreciated.
Well, thanks for the invitation. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Take care. I appreciate it.
You too.